Who is the greatest live-action Batman of all time? I'm pretty sure we all have a definitive answer to this question based on our personal preferences, but since the Caped Crusader is such a pop culture icon and arguably the most popular comic book character ever created, when it comes to arguing who the best Batman is, the discourse can get quite intense. My personal favorite live-action Batman is Michael Keaton. Feel free to check out my video on that topic if you haven't already. And my clear runner-up is Christian Bale. Again, please feel free to check out my video on why his Batman is underrated if you haven't already. But the number 3 spot is where things start to get tricky for me, because I think that bronze medal is a toss-up between Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson. And I know. They gave 2 wildly different portrayals of the character, and if you clicked on this video, you likely have a very strong opinion on who was better between the 2. Snyder fanboys probably think Pattinson was trash and looked wimpy, and the film snobs amongst us probably think Pattinson is far better, because his lone outing is, respectfully, just a better made film than any of the movies Affleck played Batman in. But as someone who mostly enjoys both of their performances of The Dark Knight, I actually think it's a very difficult call to make. They both played Batman at very different parts of his life, and capture certain aspects of Batman very well, and have a few glaring shortcomings in my eyes. So today I'm going to analyze the 2 most recent live-action Batman, and once and for all determine who I think was better. Now I'm gonna begin by assessing the flaws with both of these iterations of Batman, because while I'd say that I liked both, they do have unique weaknesses that hinder their performances in my opinion. And with Ben Affleck's portrayal of the Caped Crusader, I think the fact that it's heavily inspired by the Dark Knight Returns comic run actually hurts his Batman far more than it benefits him. Since Batman v Superman is his first appearance as the character, I don't feel like the film earned or properly explained his level of jadedness. Simply hinting at the death of Robin is not enough of a reason for this version of Batman to become someone who's perfectly fine with branding or killing people. I also think the way that Affleck's Batman interacts with Superman is quite frankly weird. I understand that Batman creates contingency plans for everyone, and seeing the destruction in Metropolis at the start of the film is certainly a big enough reason for Bruce to start a plan to take Superman out in case he needs to one day. But being such a smart individual, I think Bruce would first seek to work with Superman, as making the world's most powerful man your ally is way more beneficial than making an enemy out of him off rip. I just personally find Affleck's Dark Knight to be far too cynical. It feels like a version of Batman that we needed to work up to across multiple films. That way we could have established why he abandoned certain fundamental morals and values. With Robert Pattinson, I understand that he is playing a younger Batman who's still learning the ropes, so to say, but his Bruce Wayne is primarily where I have an issue with this performance. Bruce Wayne being such an emo and reclusive guy with very little public image seems counterintuitive to his goal of quote-unquote cleansing Gotham. I've always viewed the Bruce Wayne aspect of the character as being crucial to A, keep his identity secret, and B, to attempt to fix Gotham on multiple fronts. Because a billionaire socialite will be able to do certain things that Bruce simply can't do while he's in the suit. In a sense, they complement one another in his effort to save Gotham. But in The Batman, the Bruce side of things is kind of just an afterthought. His life as Batman is consuming his life as Bruce. And the general public doesn't even really know much about Bruce Wayne at all. And I think the world's greatest detective not realizing that he could use the persona of Bruce Wayne as a tool is very unlikely. Now you could certainly argue that since this Batman is so young, he will eventually learn this lesson and attempt to inspire hope as Bruce Wayne during the day, while at night he becomes vengeance and uses his fists to clean up the streets. But as of right now, this is a huge flaw with Pattinson's Batman, as he was only vengeance for the vast majority of his movie. Now that I've laid out my sort of fundamental issues with both of these Batmen, I'm gonna let you know who I ultimately think is better and why. And for my personal taste, I do think Robert Pattinson is the better Batman. The only area where Affleck is blatantly superior in my eyes is when it comes to appearance and presence. And I know that some people like to make fun of how bulky Ben Affleck got in the lead up to Batman v Superman. I've even seen some people refer to him as Fat Man, but I've never understood this critique whatsoever. I think Affleck looks amazing in Batman v Superman, and a really important part of capturing Batman is making us as an audience believe that you could really whoop some ass and fight crime despite having no powers. And Ben absolutely checks that box for me. Like, if you told me I had to fight a version of Batman, my last choice would be Ben Affleck. That dude was jacked as fuck and looked like he could really bring the pain. And that warehouse scene was incredible, probably the greatest Batman action sequence of all time. And I know Affleck didn't do most of the stunts involved, but still. In terms of just aura and intimidating presence, Affleck beats Pattinson. And if you only care about how badass Batman looks, I get why you could like Affleck more. But for me, presence and intimidation are just less important than the fundamental core values of Batman. And not killing others is just such an important rule that Affleck's movies do not justify his Batman being willing to break. As much as you could argue that Pattinson's Bruce Wayne is lackluster and non-existent, what is Affleck's version of Bruce Wayne actually used for? He's just as cynical and brooding as his Batman is. And I like that The Batman gave us much more of a balance between Batman the detective and Batman the fighter. He spends just about as much time using his fists as he does trying to solve the Riddler's mysteries. Sure, when he's actually fighting, he's not as physically imposing as Affleck, but his film still establishes that he's become a symbol of fear in his city. And I love that his fighting style is undisciplined. Rather than every strike being intentionally placed, he's much more of a brute with how he combats criminals, which I think speaks to the fact that he's a young Batman still developing, and this room to grow is actually really important. In Batman v Superman, we essentially started with a Batman who was at the very end of a character arc with just how jaded and cynical he had become. Whereas in The Batman, we start out with a young man who is still growing and learning how to best be a vigilante. So his shortcomings make way more sense within the structure of the plot, as we're seeing him learn these lessons throughout the runtime of his movie. Whereas we kind of just have to accept why Affleck's Batman is so closed off and flawed. We don't really receive any meaningful flashbacks to what happened to Robin or anything like that. And I think this lack of development is why the whole "Martha, save Martha" scene is so laughable. If it had been built up to in a thematically satisfying way, there's versions of that moment that could have been emotionally heavy and heart-wrenching. But as is, it feels so out of place because we know next to nothing about this Batman. And I think this speaks to the fact that Zack Snyder had a great sense of how DC characters should look and appear on the big screen, but an absolutely abysmal fundamental understanding of them as characters and how they should act. Don't get me wrong, The Batman is not without its flaws. It is far from a perfect movie. But by the end, I did truly believe that Pattinson's caped crusader had grown. The scene where he helps all the flood survivors and that one woman doesn't want to let go of his arm was really powerful. And I think that scene established that this Batman had finally realized that he can also inspire hope. Not everything has to be done through brute force and vengeance. And the far better character arc and potential for even more growth is why I do place Pattinson slightly ahead of Ben Affleck. Well, if you made it this far, I'd love to hear who you think is a better Batman, Ben Affleck or Robert Pattinson. Remember, this is just my opinion, and try to be respectful of those who disagree with you in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more Screen Stories content. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace.